cannabinoid system, or internal cannabinoid system, is old, it's ancient, and it's incredibly key to our own survival. And so Ethan Russo and some of the research that he's been doing has proposed that, like any other system in our bodies, and Bob Mellamede alludes to this in his presentations as well, if our endocannabinoid system is too high or too low, or our receptors aren't working properly, that could be what leads us to answers when we're looking at conditions like anorexia, where we're looking at conditions of even obesity, that it could be an over or underactive endocannabinoid system. Cannabinoids are passed through breast milk. Whether that's a concern for the mother or the baby, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what I know is a concern. Taking a baby away from its mother, and we see that that's the reactionary policy of what's happened in Canada and in the US in a lot of cases where cannabinoids have been detected. And I hope that our nausea and pregnancy study at least shows that for some of these mothers, the use of cannabis during pregnancy is therapeutic. You guys want to add anything to that?
Well, I've got anecdotes, I guess, in that.
That's not working.
Not working.
Okay, in that cannabis was used, as a childbirth anesthetic. It was the third most commonly used preparation in patent medicines prior to 1900, and the fourth most commonly used one after that. And I don't know of any anecdotal reports of any problems there. In addition, you had the tabloids back in the 60s and 70s searching for, outrageous stuff, and they couldn't find anything. And I've got a fantastic 13-year-old and a fantastic 17-year-old, and I don't think that they were hurt by anything in their breast milk.
One more question before we pass on.
Can you cut stuff to the mic, please?
We're not going to pass on. We're going to move on. We're not passing on just yet.
Good. Interested in research and legal status of cannabis essential oils that don't contain any THC, and if anybody is actively involved with studying the therapeutic effects of the other cannabinoids that are in the essential oils.
Well, there's no doubt that there's a lot of research right now, particularly of THC being the main psychoactive and therapeutic agent in cannabis. Certainly GW has explored the potential of CBD. They're also exploring CBN, CBG, and CBC, some of the other minor cannabinoids, to see what kind of therapeutic applications they may have. Unfortunately, right now in Canada and the US, there's no currently, I know of no prescription drugs that are trying to be put forward, or any clinical trials that are currently looking at therapeutic applications of cannabis in the form of essential oils. I can tell you that through Compassion Clubs, however, if you have any experience here in California or some of the clubs in Canada, offering cannabis in oil form for us has been very effective. We make an olive oil based product. Olive oil itself has anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects, and so when you couple that with the cannabinoids, it's been amazingly effective. I recommend, if you're making your own oil, to just put the buds in oil at a slow boil for about 25 minutes. You can strain it out, and then after that, I really recommend sublingual use. We find that that speeds up the effect of an actual oil product. The only problem is, it's more like eating cookies. You get a lot of first pass effect, and so the dosage is a little bit tricky to address, but it's proved to be a great painkiller for some of our patients with chronic pain.
Yeah, I'm working with essential oils that don't contain any THC, because according to the DEA website, if it doesn't have THC in it, then it's technically a legal product. Now, my understanding is that the essential oils, even without the THC, are still prohibited in this country, but I was wondering if there was any consideration given to researchers who are studying specifically the non-THC.
Well, hemp oil in Canada is legal, and it's an emerging and developing market, and a lot of people are using it therapeutically, not just for the other cannabinoids, but for the high rate of omega-3s.
I'm not talking about the seed oil. Yeah. I'm talking about the steam distilled buds that have no THC in them.
I'm not sure, but I can tell you that in Canada, CBD, CBN, etc., are as restricted as THC. All of the cannabinoids are restricted. Do you guys have any answers to that?
Well, I think you're talking about the non-cannabinoids, and I think the book Russo and Groten-Herman has a chapter on that I haven't read. So if you want to email me, I can at least see what that says. Groten-Herman and Russo's book, Cannabis and Cannabinoids, I believe has a chapter on the other things that are not cannabinoids. It's going to be in research stage, if anything.
Well, I'm interested in all of the cannabinoids except the THC molecule because of the legal status of it.
I'd also suggest that flavonoids and terpenoids have a lot of therapeutic properties in and of themselves. As research develops, I'm sure that we're going to find that cannabis applications are based on, and some of the success is based on terpenoids and flavonoids. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, our last speaker today. His name is Dr. Tom O'Connell. Dr. O'Connell is a thoracic surgeon who became convinced that the U.S. drug policy is profoundly mistaken as he neared the end of his active surgical career. He's been an activist on behalf of a more rational drug policy since 1995. His policy interests led him to begin screening Californians seeking cannabis recommendations in late 2002. And he's currently using an enhanced relational database to analyze data from what has grown into a registry of more than 3,000 individual cannabis applicants. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tom O'Connell.
So I won't forget what I was going to say. So I've got to stand here so I can look at them. I'm dressed now as I am when I screen patients. I used to wear a white coat when I worked in a hospital. Any way to get rid of this feedback? So it turns out to be a technical term. It's used by sociologists and their populations of people who are stigmatized in society and are hard to identify because they don't want to give away what would normally stigmatize them. And one of the most important effects of 215 was that it encouraged pot users, certainly a stigmatized population, to go talk to their doctors. Anyway, American drug policy of drug prohibition actually dates back to 1914. And it's been based almost entirely on fear of addiction as it existed back in 1914. And it hasn't changed much since then. The key maneuver to establish this policy was to convince the Supreme Court to hand over addiction medicine, or the treatment of addiction, medical decisions about addiction, to non-doctors. In those days, federal tax collectors, now federal prosecutors. And what that did was they protected that right jealously ever since then. In the beginning, the Harrison Act was only about cocaine and opiates. In 1937, cannabis was added as the third forbidden drug. And on ridiculous grounds, you're all familiar with legal madness. There was no opposition to this party, to this policy for a long time. Actually, NORML is the first organization that developed as a full-time organization in opposition to drug policy. Why was that delay for such a long period? Well, it awaited a drug war. And the reason is that the drug war enlarged this policy, which had been relatively minimal, and probably enlarged the market supplying those drugs. It was a criminal bonanza, in other words. And as opposition to the policy has grown, so has the intensity of federal defense of the policy, generating more arrests and consequently a greater fear of federal power. In the meantime, several other constituencies have found siding with the federal government in support of the drug war to be very profitable. You can think of who they are: the prison builders, cigarette purveyors, pharmaceutical industry, all have a vested interest in the drug war. And what federal policy is really about now is preservation of their right to prohibit drugs. If you read all their propaganda with that in mind, it becomes much clearer. In fact, it's very interesting that on Thursday we got a notification from the FDA of all people that pot couldn't possibly be medicine because it had to be smoked. Not only is this a distortion, it's actually an endorsement of General McCaffrey's medical judgment